Hi, I'm Christian Griego with Griego Mouthpieces, and today I'm joined by John Gruber.
Hello.
Of Oberlin College in Oberlin. Now, there are universities that are the Hogwarts, and Oberlin is one of them. Yes. It's actually a very special place. I'd heard of it growing up, but it was just, over the mystical mountains somewhere. And then you invited me to come out, and it is an amazing place. And John, you've been there now how long?
5 years.
5 years. It goes quick, doesn't it?
It does. It flies by.
And I was fortunate to go out and do a master class and do some fittings and work with some of your students. And it's a great university. It's near Cleveland.
Yes.
It's about 40 minutes away.
About 40 minutes from downtown Cleveland.
So if you're at the Oberlin College, you can have 40 minutes to go hear the Cleveland Symphony.
Yeah.
Right there in that amazing hall of theirs.
Yes, absolutely.
And can you tell us a little bit about Oberlin?
Well, it's a wonderful place. Oberlin Conservatory is the oldest continuously operating conservatory in the United States. The conservatory started operations in 1865, and the college itself was founded in 1833. And it was originally founded by abolitionists. And it was founded initially in 1833 as open to students of all genders and all races. And it was the first institution to do that in the country. And so it has a wonderful history of inclusion,
absolutely,
and being on the forefront of social issues, as well as being a wonderful training venue for professional classical musicians. So it's a great place to be.
Now, I always try and do an interview whenever there's a subject that comes up that day here. And today we started talking about articulation and the vocabulary of music. Now, I've always been of the thinking that there's not just one articulation. There's multiple articulations, just like how I'm speaking or how anybody speaks or sings or how we talk. There's always ebbs and flows, and there's what you need for that moment. But we started talking about articulation. Can you tell me a little bit about articulation and legato articulation?
Yeah. Well, the thing that I think is kind of important to think about when you're thinking about articulation is making sure that whatever you're doing, you're serving the musical purpose you need. So there are a lot of people who have a lot of ideas about, you use this particular syllable or use this particular thing for this particular effect. And really, da for legato or ta or tu. There's all kinds of things that we use as teachers to get people in the ballpark. But I think what's really important is to let your ear be serving as the guide to get you through this. And that you are really relying on what's the product coming out of my bell.
Record yourself.
Record yourself, absolutely. And record yourself from over there, from in front of your instrument, not from behind the bell and not from 2 feet away. And use that as a sort of figuring out what am I supposed to sound like. It's also easy to get trapped into what should it feel like. And I think you have to be very, very careful about about conflating what it feels like, what the articulation itself feels like to execute, and what it actually sounds like. Because oftentimes, we can talk about legato playing. Oftentimes, at least for me, when I'm articulating in legato passages, the motion almost feels more violent. Mm-hmm. There's a little bit more of a pop because it has to happen so quickly and so uniformly in order to get a really smooth sound. And we kind of can fall into the trap of only thinking of 2 or 3 little ideas about how we create articulations. One of the things I like to do with my students is I like to have them take a linguistic approach and approach particularly legato articulation, not just from a place of like da, which is what we all learned in 5th grade when we started playing the trombone, but actually looking to broaden our palette a little bit. One thing I found is that when I play legato, I'm not using da. I've never used da. But if I try to play da through the instrument, I get some kind of sound it's gummy and it's slow and it's really messy on the ends. The closest syllable I found, the closest consonant I found to describe it is actually the flipped R in Spanish or Italian, da, 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 da. And getting the tongue curled more like you do in that particular consonant sound, more curl the tongue, it gives you more of the tip of the tongue, but it's kind of not just the tip, it's the blade of the tongue. Mm-hmm. And it gives you this really, really fast articulation. If you just blow air through the horn and do it, you'll actually hear, I'm stuck. There we go. Ooh. If you blow air through the horn and you do it, it sounds really violent. You hear this really big pop in the air. But as soon as I add buzz to that, immediately it smooths out. You don't hear the pop. You just hear sound with a tiny little sliver. And so it can be easy, I think, for us to fall into this trap of what were we taught as fifth grade? What were we taught by our beginning band directors who maybe played trombone, probably didn't. Maybe they were a percussionist or a clarinetist. We use those, and we still kind of keep that language even well into our teaching careers. I have many of my colleagues who are wonderful teachers who are often describing legato articulation in particular, but lots of the articulations with kind of a limited palette of consonants to think about. And so I think expanding your palette of articulation beyond, especially beyond English, and looking for influences and consonant sounds in other languages can be really, really helpful.
I think that's amazing to hear, and it's a different way that I never heard, and so I wanted to share that with everybody out there. And also, like loud articulations versus soft playing, they're different.
They are. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I think about is I talk to my students a lot about how articulation adds airspeed to things, and if you add too much extra airspeed to notes where you're already using a lot of airspeed, like let's say you're playing something high and something loud. Let's say you're playing also Sprach Zarathustra. You don't actually have to tongue that hard to get those notes to speak. The air is already going really fast. You don't have to build up a lot of compression. You can just blow and not use that much articulation. If you're playing the first 4 bars of the Hungarian March, do, 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 you have to build up quite a bit of compression, build up a lot of pressure behind that seal before you release it. It takes a lot firmer articulation. So yeah, that's soft playing, tonguing a lot more firmly to get the same clarity that you're going to get when you're playing louder and you don't need as much.
Yeah, I think that's amazing to hear. Thanks for sharing that with me. Where can people find out more about you?
www.johngruber.net is my website. You can also find me on Oberlin Conservatory's website, oberlin.edu. You can find out more about Oberlin there. And then I'm also on Instagram. I've got you can find links to my social media, my YouTube and Instagram.
We'll put all that in the description below.
Sounds great.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that there's so many amazing people and musicians out there, and I'm really fortunate. Everybody comes here. And so I just wanted to share with everybody out there. I always like to ask a couple questions, and one of them is, what is the number one problem that you run into with young players right now, and how do you get around that?
I think that's a broad. It's a very broad question, and I sort of think in 2 directions. One is listening. I find that my students come to the conservatory oftentimes listening to more than I think maybe students did in the past. It's so easy to access recordings. Everything's out there. You can easily access a world of incredible recordings. I think a lot of my students are coming in with a pretty wide ranging knowledge of what's out there, but I think they aren't really necessarily listening with a lot of depth because they're often listening on mediums or on devices that don't give them really great sound reproduction. And so I have students all the time who will tell me, "Oh, did you hear this new great recording? Check out this thing on YouTube." And they'll pull it up for me on their phone and they'll play it for me on their phone speaker. And I'm like, "Is this how you're listening to this?" Like, "Yeah, it sounds great, right?" I'm like, "No, it doesn't sound great." I mean, yeah, the recording sounds great, but you can't actually hear any detail in the sound. You can't hear overtones. You can't hear what the sound quality of the player is that you're listening to on a phone speaker. And so I suggest to my students when they come to school that they you don't have to spend a lot of money. You can get this. You can spend $100 and get a really great set of like Audio-Technica reference monitors, and you can have them in your dorm room, and you can listen, and it'll change your listening world. I mean, it really makes a massive difference for not a whole lot of outlay money. Certainly much less than you spend on a mouthpiece.
And a lot of the reference monitors that he's talking about, they're flat, and they will produce a flat. There's no bumps in the highs. They call it the smile in the 80s, where it would be boosted bass and boosted highs. They're going to be flat, and they'll come with generally a chart proving what they're capable of. And so you'll have this flat curve, so then you're not getting influenced by the speakers themselves.
Yeah, and that's really handy when you're recording yourself, especially when you're submitting excerpts for a summer festival or for an audition. Having a set of good reference monitors to actually listen back to what you've recorded can be extremely helpful. It gives you, it's a truth teller for us, and having that truth teller is, I think, a really important thing. The other thing that I've noticed that almost every student comes into college with kind of struggling with this is tension. Lots and lots and lots of tension in our playing. And oftentimes it comes from a couple of places. You know, you'll see a lot of tension in the throat, a lot of tension in the jaw, but oftentimes I find that it starts with the head.
Yeah.
We bring the instrument up, and then you can see people stick their head forward. They bring their chin out forward towards their instrument. Yeah. And if you do that, even if I'm sitting in my chair here, if I just bring my head forward, my low back has to tighten up, my core has to tighten up. If I don't do that, if I don't tighten up, I'll fall out of the chair, flat onto the floor. And you can try this at home. You can try this yourself right now, sitting in a chair or standing up. And you'll notice that immediately, as soon as we bring our head to our instrument, you're having to hold yourself up, you're having to engage tension, and they are inhibiting your breathing. And that's maybe the biggest cause, or one of the biggest places that I see tension in almost every student.
Yeah, I would challenge everyone out there to be self-aware. And one of the reasons I'll record myself even here, I'll set up cameras even for a side angle, is I catch myself in it. And then whenever I see it, I'm like, I'll stop. I'll have to work it out, have a good posture, and bring the instrument to me rather than going to the instrument.
Yeah, I mean, I don't notice it quite that way. I notice it when I've been playing for 20 minutes and something hurts.
Yeah.
And my shoulder, I'm like, oh, why is my shoulder? Oh, it's because I'm like curling forward and compressing myself, and I just need to relax, and it goes away.
I'm going to talk about this in a later video, but PT, physical therapy, don't be afraid to go to massage or a chiropractor to keep everything aligned, and they can tell you what you're doing wrong generally, and then they can work it out. And so you don't get to a point. I actually know musicians that have some nerve damage from pinched nerves from 30, 40 years of playing trombone.
Yeah.
And I've had this discussion with them. So don't be afraid to seek out trained professionals that do ART or chiropractors. Have friends. I think it's important to keep your body healthy so that you can do this for the long term.
Yeah.
My daughter's a guitar player, and she's 14, but she practices a lot. So we just preventative, we go to a chiropractor.
Yeah. And if you're having trouble finding someone good near you, ask a string player. Every violinist, every violist, they've all got a massage therapist. Yeah. They've all got somebody, and they can help you find somebody local to you who knows what they're doing. Because you put your arm up and you start holding things, and they know.
Yeah. John, thank you so much. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, I had one other question. Here's the advertisement. So you're on a Griego 6E artist.
Yes.
Now you were on a New York 4.5 before?
I was on a New York 4.5.
So why the change? And what came with that?
We made the change. I recently had a baby. I had a daughter, and she's 11 months old now.
Beautiful.
And
just amazing.
She's a cutie pie. One of the things I discovered, though, of course, is that, and anyone out there who's a parent will know this, that kids, as soon as you have kids, there is no time anymore. And you have to be really, really careful about prioritizing your time. I don't have time to practice for 3 hours a day anymore like I used to. And so we went to the 6E because it just some of the updates you've made to that mouthpiece make things a lot more efficient. They kind of brought in some things that were great if I could practice for 2 or 3 hours a day, but maybe aren't working if I can only practice for 45 minutes a day. And so made some things more efficient, especially in the extremes in the registers. The low register is a lot more secure for me on the 6E than it was on the 4.5. And also the extreme high register, I don't have to produce nearly as much compression myself. The mouthpiece has a little bit more of that work for me. Just takes a little bit of the edge off and helps keep the sound from breaking up on me when I'm not able to be in like super duper shape all the time.
And that's important to realize. There's a point like in college where you'll be practicing 4-6 hours a day and you can do anything.
Yeah.
And then after we get out into the professional world, that's just not a reality anymore because we have other things in our lives.
Right.
So be aware, and when your life is changing, be aware that other things, instrument-wise, may need to change as well. Again, John, thanks so much.
Thanks a lot. Pleasure.